Hey everybody, it's been a while. I finally got my video editing stuff working again. Yes. And as you can see, I need a haircut, and I think all of us at this point during this self-quarantine are going to be visiting whoever we do to get our hair done as soon as it's over, hopefully. Today I wanted to talk to you about, hopefully two, horror films, two horror films that I ended up watching recently. One of them is Winchester, which is about Sarah Winchester and the infamous Winchester Mystery House. And Sarah Winchester is played by Helen Mirren. And the other one is called The Wind, and it's also a horror film. So first off, I kind of like debated when I was going to talk about the Winchester movie whether or not I really wanted to go into a lot of the history or whether or not I just wanted to stick to what the movie was about. And I think I'm going to stick to what the movie was about because I did find out some interesting things about Sarah and going to Yale and maybe some of the reasons why she may have had interests in architecture and different things that she did and how her cousins and lots of fraternal organization stuff. So it's interesting stuff, but I'm not going to go there. I'll leave the links in the bottom if you want them, or you could ask for them in the comments. Because I did my homework before I did this. I'm like, well, it's been a really long time since I've read anything about her because I went to her mystery house twice when I was younger. One was for a friend's little sister's birthday party, and yeah, I'll go there maybe at the end of the video after I talk about these two movies. So, also, if you've ever been to the Winchester Mystery House, let me know in the comments what you thought of it, because it's kind of a trippy place. Not kind of, it's a really trippy place. So, inevitably, as soon as I start this, someone's like, let me message you on Discord. I'm like, no, God, no, not right now. So anyway, yeah, so my notes, I wrote notes this time, just like I did before for The Girl on the Third Floor, because I found it to be helpful. Hopefully it doesn't ruin my flow. But I liked how they portrayed Sarah Winchester as, who she was, which is an older, single, wealthy widow with full possession of her faculties, contrary to what everybody thinks, because she's busy constructing this house that seemingly has hallways and stairs that lead to nowhere, doors that lead to outside. And in this particular movie, we're actually exploring her life through the eyes of a doctor, and that doctor's name is Eric Price, and he's been requested by Sarah Winchester because their board of directors is wanting to, of course, depose of her in some way, shape, or form as mentally unfit due to her extremely unusual behavior, or what they view as extremely unusual behavior. So this doctor named Eric, he is grieving the loss of his wife at the time. He's shown to be abusing laudanum. Yeah, and we don't become familiar with the circumstances of his wife's death until partway through the movie. There's definitely foreshadowing. I saw at least two plot twists coming, but I don't know, it depends on the person. They may or may not see them. I know that I've read a lot of really harsh critical things about this particular flick, and I can see why some people may not like it. Some of the things that people were criticizing about, like I think I read in the Wikipedia post that some of the film critics were like, it's pointless. I'm like, pointless? It's like a character study, and just because it's about a topic that may be controversial or that many people may not believe in, which is the topic of spirits and ghosts and hauntings, does not mean that it's any less valid as a way to do a character study in a horror film. But I think that's probably the problem, is that I felt like while it had horror elements, I don't know if I'd really go so far as to call it a horror film. I definitely found it more eerie than scary. And I think that also may just be because I'm a little jaded because I've seen a lot of horror films. So I checked myself with that. I wish some other critics might. I'm not going to say the acting was terrible. I guess some people thought it was one of Helen Mirren's worst performances, and I'm like, okay, there's maybe one scene I can think of where I was like, oh, really? But everything else I thought was fine. I'm like, what? Are you criticizing the fact that she's playing a woman who you want to because you're used to all the stories of this woman, Sarah Winchester, being crazy, and she's not acting the way you wanted? You know, because she's not following what you're used to when you're hearing about the story. For those of you that don't know, the background to the Winchester Mystery House has to do with Sarah Winchester, who is the heiress after her husband Oliver's passing to the Winchester Repeating Rifle Arms Company, basically. And she's extremely wealthy. And what ended up happening, there's a lot of different stories about her. One of the stories is that she consulted a medium. The medium told her she needed to keep building 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, in order to appease angry spirits because they were going to kill off her family, or had killed off family members like her husband, her son, who had died of tuberculosis, by the way. And so that's one of the stories. And she did hire people to build 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There was a bell that would go off at midnight every night. People debate about what the bell was for, whether or not it was to signal a seance, whether or not it had to do with the workers, different stuff like that. There is supposedly a seance room in the mansion that I have been in, again, twice. And yeah, so that's just some background about the Mystery House, which is what they call it usually when you see advertising for it in San Jose, California. So originally this was kind of out in the boonies, that whole area was. There wasn't really a lot out there when Sarah decided to build all of that. So back to the movie, what was impressive is that they did try and get some things according to history. Like, for instance, she did keep a lock of baby hair in her safe. She did have people work 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, right? She did have that bell go off at midnight. And she did have a lot of innovations in her architecture and the different things that she did for the house. So, for instance, even the movie bothers to point out, hey, these stairs aren't in this weird little, pattern for no reason going up the way. It's because Sarah has arthritis, and it's one of her many innovations. And one of the servants even points that out. And what I found interesting was in the movie, the servants are like, and even I think probably the builders are actually fairly protective of her, which I kind of appreciated. I from what I've read about her life, I guess she did pay them pretty well, and she took care of them pretty well. So it would make sense that despite the employer having extremely odd requests, and whatever hearsay there was, that perhaps the movie's interpretation of the builders or the servants and different folks being rather protective of her reputation would be suitable. So there's like a lot of different things that are going on in this movie as far as, my goodness, I can't remember her name. It's her relative. It's, you can tell how memorable that was. What it was is I think that the hokey part was the fact that they kept using one of the children that was related to Sarah as a way for this ghost to continue to communicate with everyone else. And later on, you do find out who this ghost is and how he's very powerful and very malevolent and stuff. And I'm trying to... There we are. Oh, okay, so that is Marion Marriott, because I was thinking to myself, I think it is her. But yeah, yeah, okay, so there are actually a few more historical figures that are actually in this movie. Again, I liked it. But I think the reason why a lot of people didn't, from what I've read online, is that one, it's definitely slower. Okay, it's a slower paced film. Remember in the beginning I said, well, I feel like this is more like a series of character studies about the doctor, about his condition, about Sarah and her, reputation, and about her family members and their family legacy and such and such and such, right? And the second thing is it's a period piece, and let's face it, a lot of people just blanket hate those. They don't have, they're just not their thing. And there's a lot of legit reasons to not like period pieces, especially ones that seem to glorify things that were not. Okay. And the third one, which I think is one of the main ones, for people not liking it is that some people, I think some people are probably irked by how anti-gun Sarah is, but I think that that really doesn't float well. Like, it doesn't bode well for me. Like, I can't float along in that barge of like, oh well, yeah, because no, if you follow the rumors and what the medium told her, of course she's not going to like guns, okay? Because they're associated with the perceived curse that is ruining her life and stealing her family members' lives. So I feel like that's a rather nonsensical thing. I think it's more related to people who are worried that it's part of the Hollywood anti-gun agenda. I actually did appreciate the fact that the movie attempted to examine the psychological fallout of like knowing that someone has been killed by a firearm or that many people have been killed by a firearm, and the idea of self-harm, okay, through using a firearm. I thought that that was actually pretty well done. And I did feel like that, I don't know, I felt like that was an important aspect to have there, because any part of learning martial arts or how to use any weaponry should involve bringing an awareness to the wielder of these facts. Okay, there are no takebacks, and you need to be aware of that. So I feel like the film did that, but I don't feel like it did it in a super preachy way. I felt like it did it in a way that had to do with the different characters and the different actual things, at least in the fictional world, that happened to them, right? I think that's fair. So the only other thing that I really liked about this film is that it's true, we actually do not know what kind of furniture or how it was arranged in Sarah's house. We don't know. Because Sarah did not really allow photography, there's like only one photo of her that even the movie attempted to replicate, which I thought was kind of neat. And because of this fact, the furniture there, I'm sorry, I heard something weird. The furniture there, we don't know what it was, and apparently I guess it was auctioned off or whatever, and there's no records of who it was auctioned off to, so there's no tracking down the original stuff, even if it's still around. So think about that. There might actually be pieces of antique furniture floating around different antique stores somewhere that, you know, might have been hers. We don't know. Maybe not, but we don't know, right? So a lot of the stuff in the house today has all been donated. So they kept a lot of that theme in that they'd had fun with it in the film. And by having fun with it, I mean they were creative in how they integrated that fact, historical fact, into the fiction. And that was that she was using the seance to be able to replicate rooms where people who had been victims of Winchester rifles died in. Okay, so that's really key. That is a really key thing here. And I thought that was really fascinating. So each room represented a different case that had been brought to her through the spirit world, and she was attempting to resolve. So from a different point of view, you could say that instead of using, she had chosen to deal with the pain of weaponry and what it can cause, you know, the kind of pain it can cause people and populations, and using that pain and that destruction and channeling it into a creative endeavor instead, which I thought was very interesting, and trying to bring that all full circle and trying to close each case for each spirit. And that was the attempted explanation in the film about why she would build a room and then deconstruct it. Because once the spirit had been able to have its sorrows addressed, they could deconstruct the room and then move on and build other rooms. So it was a really interesting film. Again, I don't want to get into too much of what actually happens. I did appreciate the mother's not last stand, but like her stand in the basement, which the basement, if you ever go and tour the house, is supposed to be one of the most haunted areas. And I've never been. I don't plan on going. and I really appreciated that too, because it was another moment where it's like Sarah wasn't a victim in that she was not afraid, right? And then they have this mother who, yes, she was afraid, but she was going to protect her child, right? So you can say what you want to about that, but anyway, and Eric, ultimately the doctor, in the end, gets some answers for himself. And so overall, I don't feel like it was a terrible film. I think that people, like when I look on IMDb and it's like, wow, you gave it that low a rating. I have seen way worse films than this. So I gave you the reasons why I think people didn't like it. I gave you the reasons why I appreciated what it tried to do. If you ever get a chance to watch it, please let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I think with that, I'm going to try. Oh, no, I don't have enough time. I'm going to split it into another video, okay? Because I don't want to just drone on forever. I've already taken up too much of your time. So the next movie I'm going to talk about is going to be The Wind. And I'll probably be wearing the same clothes because I'm not going to get changed for just one more video because that would be silly. Anyway, yeah, it's Kelly with Eclectic Entries, and thank you for watching. If you are interested in this kind of content, where we do different types of media and just discussions about that, and or day-to-day, video blog live, maybe occasionally travel entry or something about crafting, that's my channel. I post pretty much whatever I want here. That's why it's eclectic. So hit the subscribe button, ring the bell. I have a Patreon, I have a Redbubble. Check it out if you're interested. And thanks. Take care as you're able, especially with everything going on, all right? Bye.